there's a secret rarity in Apex that's only been used twice, and the last time it touched the game was 2 whole years ago. And Respawn currently reserves this rarity, which is called Iconic, for crossover events. And the last time we got a new crossover event was back in January of 2024. So, are we ever going to see this rarity and crossover events again? Well, believe it or not, at the start of Apex's life, there were a few crossover items. They aren't really a new invention. Back in December of 2019, only a few months after Apex released, we actually got a Pathfinder Star Wars skin. It was only a rare skin, and it was made to celebrate Respawn releasing Jedi Fallen Order. This skin would later return with a Star Wars holo spray when Respawn released the sequel Jedi Survivor, and I'm sure when they release the third Jedi game, we will get some more Star Wars items. As well as this, throughout Apex's whole history, users who have an EA Play subscription have been getting free charms, which are references to other EA franchises, like Dead Space and Mirror's Edge. But in the early years of Apex's life, we never really got anything notable in the way of collabs, apart from simple items like these. We never saw things like legendary items, although one of the artists that used to work at Respawn did make some concepts for crossover skins, like a Bloodhound Predator skin, which would have been absolutely awesome, and also a Pathfinder Chappie skin, which the director of Chappie actually seemed pretty impressed with. Although there would never be official Predator or Chappie crossover events, Respawn would release skins referencing these franchises. It wasn't until 2021 where we got our first proper crossover event, but it was a bit bumpy and might have given Respawn a bit of a bad taste around doing crossover events, because on the 26th of March 2021, Respawn announced they were doing their first crossover with a clothing brand called Chinatown Market. Respawn were making 4 Chinatown Market branded skins, and it was set to come out 4 days after the announcement on the 30th of March. There was an issue though, as around the time of this announcement, the Chinatown Market brand had a lot of criticism about their brand's name, which led to them actually announcing on the 29th of March, 1 day before the collab was meant to come out, that they will be changing the name of their brands due to the backlash, which meant Apex couldn't release these skins because the brand was going to change its name. So 1 day before this collab was meant to come out, Respawn had to cancel the collab and say, we're just going to have to rebrand these skins when the company rebrands. You know what? Fair enough. How long will that possibly take? Like a week? Well, it wasn't until several months later, in November of 2021, where Chinatown Market rebranded to Market, and the skins were remade to say Market instead of Chinatown Market, and then they came out. By then, I'm sure these skins didn't have as much hype as they would have if they came out back in March, and I'm sure after this situation, Respawn definitely had a bad taste about attaching the reputation of some items in their game to other brands that they can't control. And after this event went live, it was genuinely 2 whole years until Respawn released their next crossover event. But this new crossover event was an absolutely awesome one, as back in 2022, Post Malone of all people did an interview, and in this interview, he was playing Apex, and it turns out he was actually a frequent player and also spent a lot of money on the game. So I guess Respawn saw a cool opportunity and actually decided to do a collaboration / crossover event with him, which released in November of 2023. But this wasn't just an ordinary crossover event, but this event introduced a new rarity of item, which became the new rarity for crossover events, and this was the Iconic rarity. And honestly, this event was absolutely awesome. This is the event that introduced 3 strikes, which to be honest has kind of evolved into Wildcard today. And also, the skins were absolutely solid, especially if you were a Post Malone fan. The skins had plenty of fan service, and I'm pretty sure Post Malone had some sort of say in the design, so I'm sure to this day, if he still plays Apex, he's definitely rocking those skins. And this event not only showed Respawn's willingness to explore crossover events, but also do more in the future, because let's not forget, they created a whole rarity, and creating a new rarity for crossover events for one event would have been a bit dumb. And it turns out it was true that they wanted to do more. Because only a few months later, in January of 2024, we got our second major crossover event, which was the Final Fantasy crossover. And once again, it looked awesome, especially if you play Final Fantasy. The issue was, this event was a milestone event. People did not like milestone events, and I'm fairly sure this was the first milestone event ever. So people were automatically throwing a lot of criticism at this event, not because of the crossover, but because of the format. And because this was the first milestone event, it introduced the first universal heirloom, which of course was the Buster Sword. Regardless of this event being very controversial, one of the most controversial events of all time, it brought some cool content, like the first melee weapon ever in Apex, the Buster Sword weapon, and also plenty of cool little features. So despite this event being very controversial, people could still derive some enjoyment out of it, and also people didn't hate the fact that it was a crossover, they hated the fact that it was a milestone event. Although there were a few people who didn't like the idea of Respawn doing more crossover events because they thought they would break immersion, Respawn did reassure people that if they do crossovers, it's going to be the Apex way. Apparently, unfortunately, Call of Duty did not receive the same memo. But here's the thing. After this crossover event, 7 seasons ago and nearly 2 years ago, we haven't seen any. Literally nothing. Respawn brought back the Final Fantasy event and gave it a rerun, but it wasn't a new event, it was just the same one from before. And because of how the gaming community is right now, I feel like Respawn are going to be a bit cautious of bringing crossover events. For example, Call of Duty recently got very carried away with crossover events, and many people started saying it's too far. Beavis and Butthead, an American Dad, and Nicki Minaj in Call of Duty is just stepping a line that I didn't want to cross. And because of that reaction of people not liking these skins, they have promised to tone it down in the future, and in their future releases, they won't allow people to use these skins. Also, looking back at EA but on a different game, the Battlefield 6 devs did say they're not going to do what Call of Duty does with skins. So I think in the gaming community on a whole, there is a bit of a stigma around crossover skins right now, and Respawn might not want to risk annoying people. Although we do have to consider that every crossover skin we've had in Apex has been very, very tasteful. The Post Malone ones aren't just Post Malone, but they're the characters in the style of Post Malone. The Final Fantasy ones weren't just Final Fantasy characters, but are characters in the style of Final Fantasy characters. I really think if Apex did the same crossovers as Call of Duty, like Beavis and Butthead or American Dad, or even Seth Rogen, apparently, who approved that by the way, Apex and Respawn could do it more tastefully. But I fear a lot of the damage has been done with Stigma around crossover events, and that might affect the future. Although looking over to Helldivers 2, they are a shining beacon of doing crossovers tastefully. For example, they just got a whole war bond, which is basically a mini battle pass, which crosses over with Halo 3 ODST, one of the best Halo games of all time. And guess what? The Helldivers 2 community, which has a slight reputation of complaining about just about anything, actually likes it because the Halo content not only is gracefully put into the game and it fits in and it's done the Helldivers way, there's also a lore explanation to why Halo items are in Helldivers 2. Apparently in the Helldivers 2 universe, Halo is a TV show, so the items are kind of a reference to that TV show. I do really hope crossover events aren't dead, and Apex has the potential for really cool crossover events. Let's consider for a moment, Respawn is developing 2 Star Wars games right now, so why can't we have a Star Wars crossover event with Apex? Hell, even give us a lightsaber universal heirloom. And it's not like EA games haven't crossed over before. In fact, Battlefield 2042, an EA game, has had a crossover with Dead Space, another EA game. Although I would imagine there are extra moving parts to the Star Wars IP, it would still be cool to see a Star Wars event, and I don't think anybody would be against it. In fact, it's been one of the most requested and concepted crossovers in Apex's history. Is Iconic a dead rarity? Right now, it is. There have been no new iconic items in a long time. Will it stay dead? Well, actually, we don't really know. Hopefully not, but every day, more people lose hope. I don't know why we haven't got any crossover events recently, but if Respawn are scared of accidentally falling down the COD trap, just look at how Helldivers does it. Crossovers can be really fun, just do them right. And also, subscribe to see if Respawn do more crossover events.